Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and that means Tag Tuesday. And I have a tag today that's both new and old. It is a tag that has become something of a tradition. I hope that everybody does it. I'd like it if everybody did it every year. I myself think that it is a far more interesting batch of answers than, for instance, the BookTube newbie tag, which the BookTube newbie tag is mostly concerned with prognosticating and who gets that right most of the time. This is looking back. This is the book Postscript tag that was originally created by Adam at MomentoMori years ago. His video is still up. I'll leave a link to it. He still has not graced us with his return to BookTube. It's much promised, but it never happens. And I was tagged by Jeff Reeds, specifically because his cleaning lady had the day off, so he had no one else to tag. He put a clothespin on his nose so the stench wouldn't bother him, and he tagged me. And it is an infinitely updatable tag. I mean, Adam made it years ago, but this is for 2022. Looking back at your year, both on and off BookTube, both in reading and in thinking about your reading. And question number one is the longest book you read this year and the one that took you the longest to finish. And the second part of the question never really all that much applies to me. I'm a pretty fast reader and I do nothing but read. So we can stick with the first one in terms of page count. And for me, I'm pretty sure that the first volume of this series cropped up in an earlier version of mine of the Postscript tag. That is the 5 years later saga of the Legion of Superheroes, my beloved Legion of Superheroes. DC Comics, for a long time, a long, long time, 50 years, featured a team of superpowered teenagers 1,000 years in the future, solving mysteries, fighting crime, protecting planets, that sort of thing. I loved the Legion right from their first day. They are, of course, as is true with any kind of comic book product, except maybe Batman, they are almost unrecognizable in their current year incarnation for DC Comics. The whole team has been race and gender swapped. Everybody has two fathers or two mothers. All of it is Twitter politics box checking without any care at all for the fact that the Legion fan base is the most tradition-oriented fan base in all of comics and would make a rampant best-selling success out of a Legion comic that took that tradition seriously, that respected it, instead of a writer coming along and saying, well, your grandparents were horrible people, so I'm going to fix the Legion of Superheroes. Doesn't need fixing. No writer has done that in current year superhero comics for Marvel or DC. No writer is ever going to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, the Legion of Superheroes ended about 10 years ago after a 50-year run in backup stories and comics of their own and whatnot. And one of those stories that was really great was kicked off by Keith Giffen and Todd and Mary Birnbaum, and it was the 5 years later saga, where you go 1,000 years into the future, this idealistic teenage super team, but then you go 5 years later. They're not teenagers anymore, and their future universe is not bright and sunny anymore. Now, I had reservations about this when it was first announced. One of the reservations that I fired off in a letter to the editor is that this is a straw man. The future that was featured in the Legion of Superheroes was never simplistically sunny at all. When you characterize it that way, all you are doing is taking shots at your parents. But it's not accurate. The Legion of Superheroes' future world had invasions and plagues and bad luck and evil people right from the beginning. But the 5 years later saga was done so well that I had no objections almost immediately. And in a rare instance where DC Comics does its reprints correctly, they decided to reprint all of that at long last after years, decades of fans clamoring for it. Volume 1 was huge, 1,200 pages long at least, and this year I read very closely, very lovingly, Volume 2, which was also about 1,200 pages. It took a long time to do. I guess it might qualify as the second part of this prompt as well as the first one, but I think it was certainly the longest thing that I actually positioned on my abdomen to read in bed. Then we have question number 3. Question number 2 is a book you read in 2022 that was outside of your comfort zone. Most of the outside of my comfort zone reading that I did in 2022 I did as a result of Autumn Amour, which was a BookTube event created by the Bookish Bryants, designed to celebrate romance in all its forms. And I took the all its forms part of that and ran with it. For everything from Taken by the T-Regs to Twincest stories to the category, not a particular book, but a category that I'm going to give the prize to here, which is tentacle fiction. I believe I've read almost all the tentacle fiction there is out there on offer, at least for sale on Amazon, as opposed to what I can only assume is vast amounts of it on fanfiction.net or whatnot. And as you may guess from the title, it involves a human, male or female, and a lover who has more than the standard number of appendages. The lover not only has tentacles, but is therefore not human. So this is alien human literature, sex literature as well. And it was definitely outside of my comfort zone, definitely, for what it said about the author, the various authors, for what it says about the passionate readership. And I eventually just went all the way, so to speak, and wrote tentacle fiction of my own. I'd been joking with one of you in emails about how the one thing that was missing from all of this was the war and peace of tentacle fiction. So I decided to write a very short, comparatively speaking, rough draft of a novel that takes that premise seriously, but still contains all of the one-tentacled reading material, if you know what I mean. So for NaNoWriMo this year, I wrote The Winding of the Way. And November is not over yet. I have exceeded 50,000 words, which is the goal for NaNoWriMo. I'm not quite done with The Winding of the Way. I'll be doing more of it today. I'm hoping to finish it today. But I have now earned my tentacle spurs, because I've not only read a huge amount of it, I've also written it at 50,000 words, which is longer than most of the published examples of it that I've read. So I'm going to say, outside my comfort zone, this was the year of the tentacle. And question number 3 is, how many books did you reread in 2022? And here, this is one of the rare instances, books in general are one of the rare instances in my life where I actually keep numbers. And so far, as of this morning, my number of rereads for 2022 is 213. Getting to that number this morning from 2012 with a reread of Ovid, the first Marcus Corvinus mystery novel by Lindsay Davis, set in the ancient Rome of the Emperor Tiberius and revolving, at least in part, around the mystery of why the poet Ovid was banished by the Emperor Augustus, and why, when Augustus died, his successor Tiberius refused to recall Ovid, despite being implored to do so by all of the literary world of his day, which Tiberius took very seriously. He took that literary world very seriously. Augustus was not particularly literary, but Tiberius was. He still refused to do it. And it is still a mystery. In the real world, in the historical world, it is still a mystery why that was. Ovid himself only very faintly alludes to what was wrong, to what his offense was. And no one has ever blabbed. There is no note. There's only speculation on why that is. So this novel, Ovid, no, it's not Lindsay Davis, it's David Wishart. And he goes nuts on what the reason for that is, spins a whole mystery around it. And I read it. It was reprinted by, it's a UK publication. It was reprinted in an American paperback years and years ago. I read it then. And this is my first time rereading it on the Kindle. And I was struck by a lot. I was struck by a lot of what goes on in that novel. First, by a massive, dramatic misstep of exactly the kind that David Wishart just stopped doing. He learned about his craft the more that he wrote Marcus Corvinus mysteries, so it never happens again. I can't imagine what was going through his mind to have that dramatic misstep running all throughout this book. Spoiling the book, really, from page 30 on. But in another sense, impossible to spoil because it's just so much kinetic fun. This is along the lines of Lindsay Davis in terms of ancient Rome murder mysteries, in that it's very anachronistic. The character talks like Sam Spade. The way the character thinks, the lingo, everything. It's not stately historical fiction, like, for instance, the Roman mysteries of Stephen Saylor. It's not like that at all. It's the exact opposite of that, but so enjoyable to read. And another thing that struck me, this is the first of the Marcus Corvinus mysteries, another thing that struck me is how young Corvinus is. When I read, I mean, he has such a wise guy tone, and he narrates the book, that you kind of think of, a late 30s Sam Spade type guy, but he's 20. He's 20 years old. He's a boy. I should have picked that up the first time I read it, because all the older characters call him boy. But I didn't. Now I did this time. Really, really enjoyed it, but that brought me up to 213. So that's where I am right now. That number will go up a lot before the year is over, but that's where it is right now. Then we move on to question number 4, which is your favorite reread of 2022. That's going to be awful tough. That's going to be awful tough. One of my favorite rereads for 2022 answers another question later in this tag, but it's going to be tough for me because a lot of the rereading that I did this year was kind of peripheral. It was kind of peripheral stuff. It was I reread a couple of westerns. I reread a whole bunch of murder mysteries, and that doesn't really do it. I'm going to say that my favorite reread of 2022, it was actually spurred by an unexpected find at the Brattle Bookshop. It was The Last Generation of the Roman Republic by Grun, a classic, towering study of the late Roman Republic right before it was wrecked by Julius Caesar. And that's not meant intentionally to dovetail with the David Wishart book. Just so happens I got a lot more out of that book than I did when I first read it when it was first published. I've read a lot more about ancient Rome since then, in the years in between. So I'm glad that I did. My original paperback of The Last Generation of the Roman Republic really couldn't have stood another reread. I've reinforced it a million times. It's still falling apart. So I'm glad I have a newer trade paperback to do. Then we have, let's see here, prompt number 5, a book you read for the first time in 2021 that you look forward to rereading in the future. Now, I have some pictures here, so that you're not just staring at me. And this is the answer to that question. This is The Messiah Confrontation by Israel Noel. We've seen this on this channel in the advanced copy and the finished copy. I thought this was fascinating, but it's a very similar thing to The Last Generation of the Roman Republic, which is that I know that the more I learn about this subject, the more I'm going to enjoy a reread of this book. It's a story about why Jesus was put to death. What doctrinal issues were at the heart of it that had nothing to do really with him as an individual, or especially his ministry. Nothing at all. This author characterizes it as the Pharisees versus the Sadducees, with Jesus as basically collateral damage. And I could tell, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I could tell from the notes and the sources that the more I learn, the more I'm going to enjoy a reread of this. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to give it a couple of years to marinate. And this was translated by David Mizell. Noel did not write it in English, and I'm never going to read it in the original. So I'm going to have to make do with this translation. Then question number 6 is your favorite single short story or novel that you read in 2022, and this is technically a reread. I read Brigida Olibas's biography of Shirley Hazard, the writer Shirley Hazard. I loved it. I reviewed it. I thought it was fantastic. And it had one of the effects that it had, apart from making me think about the ups and downs of a writing life, since I live one of the effects that it has almost inevitably was to make me reread Shirley Hazard. And I read a bunch of her short stories, but especially the title story of the collection, Cliffs of Fall. The title story, Cliffs of Fall, I reread that for the first time in, decades, and loved it. I love this author anyway, but The Cliffs of Fall is such a merciless short story. It is. Do I have a picture of it here for you, so you're not just staring at me? Yeah, this was the rather pretty trade paperback collection, a reprint of this from a few years ago. The title story here, Cliffs of Fall, is so merciless. It is such a pitiless story. You, the reader, are left on the rocks, and you must decide for yourself what you will do, because you're not being taken by the hand at all. A lot of times this author will do that. She will take you by the hand, but not in Not in this story. I thought it was toweringly good. Then question number 7 is mass appeal. A book you like that you would recommend to a wide variety of readers. I have an answer to this. It's not going to seem like it is one, but it is one. It is one. I stake a lot on my ability to assure you of this. I stake a lot on my ability to recommend a book. You have heard me mention it many times before. It is M, Son of the Century, by Antonio Scarlatti, translated by Anne Milano Appel. And it is a big, fat historical novel about the late 20s and early 30s of Benito Mussolini. So it is before he becomes a dictator of Italy. It's before that. It's when he's a muckraking newspaper columnist and editor. It's when he's a muckraking street agitator. And it's long, and I know already what it sounds like. I know already what some reactions will be, which is, oh, come on. You could recommend that. You love historical fiction. You love history. But if I don't love either one of those things, I'm not going to love this. How can you say recommend to a wide variety of readers? I not only say it, but I rest a lot of my reputation on it every single time I go out on a limb about something like this. Believe me or not, and you should, because my recommendations very seldom go astray. Believe it or not, if you try this, you will love it. You will love it. Almost certainly. There may be a few readers out there who will just not have the patience. It doesn't require a whole lot of patience, though. It is fast and smart and surprisingly poetic. It is brilliant. You will love it. Now, there have been other novels, even big novels translated from the Italian, where I was deeply impressed with them, and they made their way onto my year-end best-of list, but I didn't recommend them to just anybody. Think about The Catholic School, a novel that's a third again longer than this thing. I loved it. I realized that it's a problem book. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, but I didn't recommend it to anybody. With this, I am. I am not wrong. You will come back and say Steve was right. So that's what I recommend to the widest possible variety of readers. Anyway, then question number 8 is specialized appeal. A book you liked but would be hesitant to recommend to just anybody. I have 3 here. We've seen them all on this channel, I think. The first one is by Michael Lamb. This is A Commonwealth of Hope. This was brilliant. The only thing that was lacking for me when I originally opened it on camera was not knowing whether or not the writer really was up to the task, and this writer is. And this is a study of the political thought of St. Augustine, who's far, far more better known for his religious and theological thought. This is a study of Augustine with both feet firmly planted in the real world. And it's fantastic. I loved it. But in terms of a recommend, you would need to know something about Augustine's literature. You would certainly have had to have read the Confessions, but I say that in order to get the most out of this book, you'd have to not only read The City of God by St. Augustine, but also be fairly familiar with it. So this is not for everybody. I don't think it's for everybody. Maybe its author would disagree. But I read it with that in mind. I read it with an eye towards whether or not I could recommend this to anybody. And there are 4 people in my life, total, 4, the number 4, that I can recommend this to. So that's not many. So this is one of them. This is one of the ones that I'm going to mention. Then the next one is this. This is a Blackwell book. This is the political culture of the Roman Republic. So once again, what with Ovid and the last generation of the Roman Republic, and now this. This is relatively the same period, same actors, same time period, and this is in the weeds as far as the details go. So I could certainly recommend this very much to somebody who already knows the subject matter. I wouldn't recommend it as an introduction to the subject matter at all. But it's out there, it exists, and I would recommend it, provided you have the requisite background knowledge. And then there's this one, and this is by Daniel Mark Epstein. He was the editor on it, and in a way, it almost breaks my heart. But it nevertheless is true. This is Rapture and Melancholy, the diaries of Edna St. Vincent Millay, the great poet, Edna St. Vincent Millay. And there have been scholarly diary entries like this, where I would not have put it in this category. or I might have put it even in the earlier category about the widest possible appeal, but only if the editor writes it that way. If the editor constructs it so that it is introducing you to the author, so that it is carefully contextualizing everything to show you, the general reader, why this is interesting, then I could maybe recommend it to a wider readership, but not in this current form. No. In this current form, it's very much for the cognoscenti of this poet. I'm not 100% sure that is a fault. The people who are interested in this poet or are willing to really work to meet the editor more than halfway will really enjoy this. I really enjoyed it. But if you've read a couple of poems by Edna St. Vincent Millay, maybe you haven't read the great biography of her by Nancy Milford, maybe you haven't read anything about her at all, this will be almost incomprehensible to you. So it's a perfect case of where it'll be just pure catnip to people who are already interested in the subject, much like the book on the Roman Republic, on the politics of the Roman Republic. It'll be pure catnip to people who already know the subject, but it'll be, I would imagine, largely unsatisfying to people who don't. So those are three. I could go on. I did quite a bit of specialized reading this year, but we can stop with just three. Then we have question number 9. Reflect on your year as a bookish content creator. Your goals met, your good and bad memories, your favorite videos, etc., etc. A lot of these subcategories don't apply to me. I don't have any goals. I view these videos as conversations with friends. I don't have goals for my conversations with friends. And the same thing is true with looking back and saying, well, here's my favorite. I don't think many people look back at a week's worth of conversations with friends and say, yeah, that was the peak. That one really hit all the right measurement metrics or whatnot. The same thing is true, of course, with legitimate metrics. I couldn't care less about them. I don't pay any attention to them. I don't look at them. Half of them, I don't even know where to find them on YouTube Studio. I make videos, I post them, and then what I do is read and respond to replies, read and respond to emails that those videos generate in my inbox. But the rest of it, all of the metrics that YouTube wants me to be paying attention to and then contouring my content to it about which videos perform better or viewer retention time or anything like that, I don't pay any attention to it at all. I don't pay so though along those lines I don't have any answers. Of course, good and bad memories, I can certainly answer that. 2022 had a monstrous a bad memory when I look back on BookTube specifically, where someone that I considered a friend, someone I thought I liked, someone whose projects I supported, made a 20-minute long obscenity-laced attack video about me specifically to monetize the views that it would get, and then made a second, and then made a third, and then made a fourth, and as far as I know, it stopped at 6, but I'm not checking anymore. So not an example of someone you thought was a friend who you kind of rubbed the wrong way and so you don't hear from them, but rather someone you thought was a friend, someone whose endeavors you tried to forward out of friendship, who had not only a uneven take on something, but went fully psychotic. I hate him more than anyone in the world, except that I'm going to lie into the camera and say I love him. Over and over again. That was not only, of course, bad and deeply distasteful, but weird. The extent of it was weird, and I don't want to forecast the future at all. Those of you who know me really well, especially those who know me in real life, will know that there is nothing that will get to me worse than that kind of psychotic, frothing at the mouth betrayal by someone I considered a friend. Nothing will do that. A frothing at the mouth attack by a stranger will rub right off me. Now, I've been on YouTube long enough so it'll bounce right off. But that had all the elements necessary to do what I have a horrible penchant for doing, which is to brood on. It's exactly the kind of thing I brood on, is what I'm trying to say. It's exactly the kind of thing that gets worse with time in my mind instead of better. And it has. I have no idea what that says for the future. I have no idea what that says for my continued experience with BookTube. And I should point out that it was enormously overbalanced by the good stuff, by the good memories this year on BookTube. I found dozens and dozens of new channels that I absolutely love. I continued with friendships all year long with people, made new friendships with people all year long, both on videos, the kind of video badinage that you have, but also on Voxer in real life. That has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and that is completely real. That is every bit as real as any kind of personal attack. That is absolutely real, and there's a whole lot more of it. Gone are the days, I would imagine, if I looked, I would imagine that my earliest version of this book Postscript tag probably had a much more starry-eyed Steve. Probably that Steve had not encountered much along the lines of what I'm talking about. Those days are gone, of course. The days of cozy talk about this little corner of BookTube, they don't survive someone trying to hyper-monetize traffic on attack videos about someone who's been nothing but friendly to them. They don't survive that. Nothing like that kind of idealism survives that experience. But the positives have been enormous. They might not be starry-eyed anymore, but they've been enormous. So many of you email me now all the time. So many of you got into the habit of emailing me and voxering me about whatever's on your mind. That leads to genuine conversations that I wouldn't give up. I would miss them if I gave them up, is what I should say. I would miss them a lot. Because they are completely real. So when I reflect on my year as a bookish content creator, it's mostly positive. It's overwhelmingly positive. It's 95.5 positive. It's 95.5 positive. And the couple of you that know me in real life, especially the couple of you who've known me for years, are already shaking your head, saying, yeah, it's 95.5, but the 5% is exactly what gets to him. And we know what that's like. We know what that's like. It's a dog who won't let go of an old bone. The 5% that was bad was the worst kind of bad for me personally. I shouldn't, when I'm sitting here assessing, of course I'm on the brink in just a few weeks. I'll be doing nothing but assessing. Right now, this is all just sort of kiddie pool assessing, but even so, even now, I shouldn't let that overshadow the good stuff. The good stuff has been amazing. You know that because a lot of you have been involved in it. I leave my email on every video. A lot of you will email and say, I really didn't agree with that point that you made in a video. I mean, how on earth can you be ignoring X, Y, or Z? And I know because most of the 95%, more than that, of the interactions that I have on BookTube are with people who get how to disagree with a friend. It's entirely possible to do. Friends do it all the time. It's just the internet. It's social media that has trained people to be rabid animals. At the slightest hint of disagreement, let's be a rabid animal. Not to understand how adults can joke with each other or where the points are landing and whatnot. I know when someone emails me that almost certainly they're going to get how to do that. So that has led to contentious, very fun conversations, some of which are still going on. That's wonderful. And I didn't have that before BookTube. Not anything like the dimension or the variety that I do now. So 95% to 5% positive. It's been 95% positive. A hugely positive year, a hugely positive experience. Tons and tons of reading events of all kinds. I read text aloud, which was enormous fun, more fun than I thought it would be. Tons and tons of bookish events that where I was invited to join in or I horned my way in. And it's just tons and tons of ongoing collaborations. Just 95% positive. Let's put it that way. It's 95% positive. And then the last point here is to tag people. And I have a bunch of people that I want to tag. I tag a novella, of course. I tag Criminale, our dark Pied Piper, our trash master. Like so many people at the beginning of 2022, one of my BookTube goals was his complete eradication. But instead, like a Sith Lord, he has only grown stronger. So there's no, if you can't beat him, you might as well join him. So I'll tag Criminal. I think he did this last year. I tag Micah Cummins, of course. Love to hear your reflections on your year. I tag Joshua, Coffee, Cats, and King. I don't know if reflection at the end of the year is your type of thing, but if it is, feel free. I'd love to hear what the shape of your year was like. I've been watching all of these people's videos. So in addition to hearing thoughts on, the books that fit these categories, I'd also like to see if I can sort of guess some of them. I've been watching all these videos. I've been paying attention. I think I ought to know some of them anyway, or maybe not be surprised by them anyway. But I also tag Ms. Reads a lot. And it's a moonshot, but it might be time for your twice a year you make a video. Jennifer, insert literary pun here. It might be nice if you could make a video, so I tag you as well. Oh, we have an appearance by the Bean. Oh, look at that. I only had to mention Jennifer for the Bean to appear. Maybe that means she should also visit. A visit wouldn't kill you. I'm just saying. But anyway, that is the BookTube Postscript tag. I will leave the appropriate links down below. And I will wrap this up for now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.